Hi there, my name is Justin Villery, and I'm the Managing Director of Draw the Lines PA. Draw the Lines is a project of the Committee of 70. The Committee of 70 is a good government, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization based in Philadelphia, but we work statewide in Pennsylvania. And we brought Draw the Lines to Pennsylvanians of all ages across the Commonwealth from 2018 through 2022 to help create a better process and then ultimately better voting maps through the process of redistricting. So what we've done on our website, drawthelinespa.org, is hosted a suite of educational and learning resources for Pennsylvania students and voters to understand what redistricting is and how they can be involved in it. So our project, as you can see on our website, was quite successful in creating that better process and better maps through the 2021 and 2022 redistricting effort. But we want our resources to live on. And so we have set up on drawthelinespa.org our evergreen resources, if you will, of learning materials, content, curricula that are available for students in middle school, high school, college, all the way up into adulthood, where they can learn about redistricting and gerrymandering, how it impacts their vote and their politics and government, and what they can do to participate and really get their hands on a map and learn about how these maps are drawn. So I am actually going to share my screen. We have a presentation that we do, and we've done this in over 300 classrooms across Pennsylvania since 2018. And this is an updated version that will be applicable from 2022 onward, so that you can give this to students, teachers you can give this to students you can do this yourselves, and anybody interested in just learning about redistricting and how it impacts Pennsylvania, this resource is for you. So I'm gonna click forward. Again, Draw the Lines was a project that went on for nearly 5 years. It engaged over 7,200 Pennsylvanians in how to draw election maps. What our primary premise was we did competitions for students to draw their own maps. And we gave them the same kind of software and data that the political professionals had previously only been able to use themselves. Nobody else had access to these types of tools. And we were able to, working with a number of partners across Pennsylvania and across the country, start to allow for the democratization of these resources, that people could use that same data and same software to draw their own maps. And again, I'll note our website, drawthelinespa.org, where you can see all of our resources and then access the free mapping software that's available to the public. The way we start this conversation, and you can do this in your classroom, if this is a classroom watching this, is asking students, what issues matter most to you? You know, it could be healthcare, it could be the economy, it could be green jobs, the environment, it could be immigration. No matter where you are or what political ideology you come from, I'm sure you have an opinion when you go to the polls, or if you are not yet 18, when you will first go to the polls to vote, you're going to have some issues that matter to you. And what is vital to understand is redistricting and how these lines are drawn on a map impacts every other issue that you care about. If you want to see something done on healthcare, for example, who you vote for is going to have a huge determination on the policy that you want to see in place. And so who you vote for is determined by the lines that are drawn on these maps. And so that's what we're going to discuss. If you're thinking about any issue, you're not going to see what you want out of that issue, out of your politicians or your government, until you see elections that are responsive to the voters' needs. So that's a primary takeaway here. What you're looking at right here on this slide is a map of the United States of America and its congressional districts from the previous round of redistricting in the 2010s. So each map or each state has a set of congresspersons that they elect to send to Washington, D.C. to represent them in the U.S. House of Representatives. And so we're going to, focus on Pennsylvania here, but any other state across the country, if they have more than one congressperson, is going to be doing redistricting on a congressional level. You can see in Pennsylvania, if you look really close, these are old districts, and where these districts fall, where the lines are drawn, has a huge impact on the types of people who we send to Congress And drilling down who we send to our state legislatures as well. We're looking at a congressional map, but states also have state legislatures. In Pennsylvania, we have a state house and state senate, and those come with districts as well. And so where those lines fall on a map is determinative of what our politics look like, both nationally and in each state. It's also important to note that the census defines the data with which we use to draw our voting maps. 2020 saw the census, the most recent census across the country. The census is done every 10 years. So in years ending in 0, that's when our federal government counts every single person living in the United States, whether you're a citizen or not, whether you were just born or you're 110 years old. Those people are all counted. And then that data, where they live, then goes into determining where the voting lines fall, because you have to have the same number of people in every district. We also start with some basic definitions. What is redistricting and what is gerrymandering? They're not exactly the same thing. First off, redistricting is the constitutionally mandated process that we have to do every 10 years after the census. And so we redraw our boundaries to incorporate changes from the previous census. So we had our census in 2010, and then we drew our maps, and then we had a census in 2020. And the 2020 census showed that people moved into and out of the state of Pennsylvania. People were born, people died. And so we have to redraw those lines, those districts, so that we have an equal population within each district. So we are drawing districts for both Congress and then the state legislature as well. So then that leaves the question, what is gerrymandering then? And gerrymandering is something that is not required and actually has a pretty negative impact on our politics. Gerrymandering is when politicians are drawing boundaries to protect their personal or their party's self-interest. So you could have a party who's trying to gerrymander the other party out so that they can gain control of the chamber or send more seats to Congress. Or you could have incumbents working together across party lines to try to protect each other at the expense of fair and competitive elections from any challengers that might come along. So this act, gerrymandering, prevents fair elections. It prevents the people from having their voice heard in who they want to elect them, or who they want to represent them, I'm sorry. So thinking, the basics of redistricting, touching this a little bit. Every state redraws their districts after every census. They should have the same number of people in them. In Congress, you have to have almost exactly the same to the person. State legislatures, the target population allows for a wider variance based off of constitutional case law. But ultimately, districts need to have roughly the same number of people. And redistricting is so important because it determines who has a voice in the political process. Where candidates can run for office, and ultimately who is elected. So it's a vital process for our democracy. It's helpful to step back. We just completed a map, and we'll see that map in a second. But it's helpful to step way back in Pennsylvania and look at our previous congressional map that was put in place after the 2010 census. This is the 2011 congressional map of Pennsylvania. This map was in force for 3 congressional elections. 2012, 2014, and 2016. It was ultimately overturned by the Pennsylvania State Supreme Court as an unconstitutional partisan gerrymander. And as you start to spotlight these individual districts, you can see why. First off, we see what the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette once termed the malnourished hammerhead shark. This is District 12 here, way out in the southwestern part of Pennsylvania. And it connects Beaver County all the way to Somerset and Cambria County through this very long, squiggly body of a shark, I guess you could say. And so this was done to maximize the power or the votes of one particular political party. And that happened, this gerrymander was drawn by the Republican Party, and so I'm going to pick on the Republican Party as we talk about this map in particular, but it's important to note that the Republican Party is not the only party that does this. Democrats, when they are in power, do this as well, and we'll talk about that in a second. So let's go east a little bit and look at the district that's right next to District 12. And this feels like maybe it's kind of a disfigured Pac-Man. District 9 looks like it's eating District 12 or the head of that shark there. And so you can see Indiana County is connected with Fayette, but Westmoreland County, in between those two counties, is included in two other districts. And so there's, no real sense of community between these counties without having Westmoreland attached to it as well. So this, again, done to maximize partisan advantage. If we go to the Northeast, this is an example of what's called packing and cracking. So you can see, I feel like this is maybe a Shakespearean ghost doing some sort of soliloquy here. And so Democratic voters are packed into this district, connecting Scranton and Wilkes-Barre. Then you go down into Stroudsburg, to Easton, and then over to Pottsville. And so you're connecting Democratic voters while the surrounding districts are cracking Democratic voters in those surrounding counties to ensure Republicans are winning those surrounding districts. And then, of course, the infamous, one of the most widely known gerrymanders in the country, the last redistricting cycle, was Goofy kicking Donald Duck. This is based in the southeastern part of Pennsylvania, and it connects, I believe, 5 counties together through Goofy kicking Donald Duck right here in the rear end. The most notable part of this is Goofy's head is connected to his body with a neck that was literally the parking lot of a seafood and steakhouse near the King of Prussia Mall on Route 422. That parking lot was what connected voters in Montgomery County down into Delaware County, Chester County, and then over into Lancaster and Berks County. So this was one of the most infamous gerrymanders of the 2011 cycle. So you heard me mention the words cracking and packing, and this is the core element of, if you were going to gerrymander a map, this is how you do it, is through these two terms. Your goal in gerrymandering a map is to try to win as many seats as possible by allocating your voters efficiently. You want to win seats maybe 55 to 45, 60 to 40, because it doesn't matter in our system, does not matter what your vote margin is. The winner gets the seat. And so you want to win as many districts as you can by a small majority, and you want your opponent, the opposing party, to win as few districts as they can by a huge amount, right? So that they have packed all their voters together, and then you've cracked the remainder of their voters into a number of districts so you can win those seats. So we're going to take this scatter plot, the green party and the purple party. This is just duplicated right and left. We're going to see on the left side, you can see if green was in charge, what might happen if they were to pack purple voters into one seat. And those purple voters, they're winning, what is that? That looks like 9 votes to 1 in that purple seat. And then the remainder of their voters are cracks. They're losing 6 to 4 in most of the rest of these seats here. So that way, even though there's exactly 20, I believe it's 29 purple voters in this state, and there are 29 green voters, if you are able to pack a bunch of purple voters into this, then the Green Party, even though there's the same number of voters, they are able to win 5 out of the 6 seats. Say you draw districts, just straight lines like a pie. Here, you could actually see purple gaining an advantage because they're able to more efficiently allocate their voters by splitting up. If we think of this as like an urban core, for example, you split the purple voters so that they're connected with a more politically heterogeneous group out in the suburbs, for example. In this case, the purple voters might win 4 seats and the Green Party would win 2. So where you draw these lines can have a huge impact on the outcome of an election. And if you are intentionally trying to gerrymander so that you gain as much influence and your party wins as many seats as possible, there are certainly ways that you can do that, and that's through cracking and packing. Like I mentioned before, both parties do this. Pennsylvania, it was the Republican Party that did this in 2011. They created a set of districts. There were 18 seats in the old Pennsylvania maps. And for 2012, 14 and 16, no matter who won more votes among the congressional delegation, Republicans won 13 of those 18 seats. Pennsylvania is a pretty purple state. Remember, Barack Obama carried it in 2012. The Republicans did quite well in 2014, and Donald Trump barely won it in 2016. but Republicans won 13 out of 18 seats because they were able to draw districts like this. If we were to go about 70 or 80 miles south of Pennsylvania into Maryland, then you would see a pretty classic Democratic gerrymander. I believe, I don't remember who called this the praying mantis, but you can see some sort of ink splatter here in and around Baltimore that I believe Maryland had 8 congressional seats in the previous round, and Democrats were winning 6 of them. And Democratic politicians in Maryland wanted to squeeze out a 7th win. And so they helped draw this district to more efficiently allocate their voters so that they could win a 7th seat. So this is a practice that is done by both parties to try to maximize their gains when they have unchecked control to draw these maps. It's been going on since the dawn of the Republic, to be honest. This is one of the first gerrymanders. It was coined as such by a Massachusetts newspaper when the Massachusetts governor at the time, Elbridge Gerry, signed off on a map in which this newspaper thought it looked kind of like a salamander, and then they gave it the name the gerrymander. And through time, over the last 200 years, the G has softened into gerrymander. But this is something that's been going on for 200 plus years in the United States. Because if you think about it, it's natural self-interest. Politicians are going to try to protect their goals if there is not a check on them from either an opposing party or from citizens themselves. And so this has been going on forever. The reason why it's gotten so bad just in the last 10 to 20 years is because big data and big software and technology are allowing for very, very small micro incisions on these maps in which politicians and the parties can identify who you're voting for or who you're most likely to vote for just based off of the type of stuff that you might post on the internet or the things that you buy on Amazon or whatever. And then they can then plug that info into really high-powered mapping software that then allows them to optimize their maps so that they are most efficiently allocating their voters. So for example, if you like a post on Instagram that might have a hashtag in favor of the NRA, then that info is going to get sold to the parties, and they're going to understand, all right, you're most likely, if you are supporting a post that has a hashtag from the National Rifle Association, you are most likely a Republican. And then they are, whether you're a Republican or Democratic operative, they're going to know I either want you in my district or I don't. And so that's how they use this type of data, all publicly available, to create these very high-powered maps that maximize their utility as a party. And so we've tried to give that data back to that data and that mapping software back to citizens and voters. They can understand and participate in the process, and that's what we've done. I'll talk about that in a little bit. So wrapping this up in terms of what gerrymandering does to our politics, there are some pretty significant impacts. First off, it locks in results. I mentioned earlier that in Pennsylvania, after the 2011 maps were signed off, in 2012, 14, and 16, no matter who won more votes, a Democratic congressional candidate or a Republican candidate, the Republican Party won 13 out of 18 seats. That map was thrown out. And in 2018, a map that was not considered nearly as gerrymandered was put in place by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. And that created a 9-9 split, which is more befitting of Pennsylvania's battleground status. So these locked-in results can have downstream effects for the rest of the bullets on this slide here. Gerrymandering also creates a bias for incumbents. Incumbents don't feel like they have to work hard for your vote because the results are locked in, right? And it becomes much harder to challenge an incumbent when a district is drawn for a particular candidate who's already in office. That can lead to some very static politics and unresponsive politicians to Pennsylvania's voters. It perhaps most importantly creates really, really significant hyperpartisanship in our politics. If you don't have to worry about losing your election in the general election to a candidate from the opposing party, say if you're a Democrat, you don't have to worry about losing your seat to a Republican because your seat is gerrymandered in favor of your party. The thing you have to worry about is somebody coming at you from your left flank, or if you're a Republican, from your right flank. So it creates this setup where most politicians don't worry about the other party. They worry about somebody out ideologuing them on the far side of the political spectrum. And it creates this almost a barbell effect in our politics, where a lot of politicians reside on the spectrum, on the far ends of the ideological spectrum. And there's very few politicians that are in the middle. And so losing those moderate candidates creates a whole lot of gridlock, and things don't get done. Generally, there's nothing wrong with having a certain number of politicians who are accurately representing their voters' views on those ideological spectrums. The issue becomes when those candidates are representing moderate voters who, if they had other choices, would not be voting for them. And it creates this big effect where there's a lot more ideological candidates than would typically exist if you didn't have gerrymandering going on. And so it leads to this lack of any sort of legislation that happens, meaningful politics or discussion. And we're seeing that in our politics right now, for sure. That ultimately leads to voter apathy. Voters don't feel like their vote matters. It feels like it's that locked in result means, well, my vote doesn't count. I don't need to vote, which is as bad as it gets for the health of democracy, when voters don't feel like their voice can actually be heard, which ultimately leads to corruption. It leads to unresponsive politics. It leads to a decline in the health of our democracy. So what we did with Draw the Lines PA for the last 5 years, we've been taking this publicly available software and our learning tools and trying to give them to Pennsylvanians across the Commonwealth, whether you are young, old, Republican, Democrat, regardless of your race, nationality. And we wanted people to draw their own maps so that we could understand how Pennsylvanians wanted to be represented through our congressional and legislative districts. So we had students and adults from over 150 schools participate in these competitions that we did. We gave away over $130,000 in prizes through these 5 competitions that we did. And ultimately that created about 1,500 citizen maps that were submitted to our competitions. People declared what values mattered most to them, and we'll take a look at those values in a sec. And then we took those values and how people represented their communities and put them into a composite, what we call the Pennsylvania Citizens Map, which is a 17 district map that we then submitted to the General Assembly, to the governor, and to the Pennsylvania Commonwealth Court and State Supreme Court for consideration. And as you might read about at a later point, the final districts for Pennsylvania in 2022 were chosen by the State Supreme Court from a set of 13 maps that were submitted, some from parties, some from voters, and then some from organizations like us that are good government groups trying to represent statewide voters. And so we were almost chosen. We were one of the finalists, but even though our map was not chosen, we were pleased that the map that was chosen was far better than what was drawn in 2011 in terms of partisan fairness to both parties, in terms of limited number of splits of counties and municipalities, in terms of how compact the districts are, how well it represented communities of interest. That map that was chosen was much better. And so through active engagement from voters and citizens and students through programs like Draw the Lines, we were able to put together a truly better process and better maps, which we were very proud of. So again, the redistricting process in Pennsylvania is over for 2022, but that doesn't mean, we stop. We are starting to prepare for 2031, right? And that's why we're leaving this webinar plus our resources online so that people can participate and learn about redistricting. This is something that's vital to our democracy and should be engaged with throughout the decade, not just in the run up to 2029, 2030, 2031. So that's what we're going to talk about today. we're going to go into a tutorial for the gold standard of mapping. That's called the wonderfully titled Dave's Redistricting App. And so I'm going to X out of this screen here. I'm going to go to drawthelinespa.org. So right now, what we're going to do is we are going to take a look at how to draw a map. And on our website, under the Draw a Map tab, we have info on how to do this. And we encourage you to start in 3 steps. There's step 1, think. Step 2, think about the guide, the user guide that is available. And then step 3 is to start mapping. The first one is the one I want to spend some time on because this is hugely important. This is an exercise called Flashes of Insight. And Flashes of Insight is something we put together to help students think about what goals you want to put into your map. And so it's a set of 9 flashcards that are on our site where each of these values determines how you're going to be drawing your map. You could draw a map in which you're trying to value communities of interest. These are areas that have some common sense of representation. Maybe an economic zone, a racial identity, a neighborhood, an environmental, like a watershed. There's all these different definitions of communities of interest that are important. You might want to create simple compact districts. We saw Goofy kicking Donald Duck. You want to avoid that. And so maybe just creating nice compact districts without jagged borders is something that's valuable to you. Maybe you want to create competitive elections, as many as possible. So this would be where the number of Democrats and Republicans, you're trying to maximize the number of districts where those registered voters are relatively equal so that either party could win as many districts as possible, depending on the election year. Contiguity, this is a value that is required. All districts need to be contiguous. You can't have part of District 1 over here completely broken off from part of District 1 over here. So that is required within the Constitution. There are limiting county and municipal splits. This is something that is also written in the Pennsylvania State Constitution, that as much as possible, you need to limit splitting counties and municipal boundaries. So the idea like Bucks County, for example, we don't want to split Bucks County. And so you want to try to minimize that. You can make that argument for any county. There are going to be splits. It's impossible to avoid, but people try to minimize those as much as they can. Equal population is also a requirement. Congressional, you need to have exactly the same number of people. State legislative districts don't have to be quite as stringent on that, but it's the concept of one person, one vote. If you've got, 10,000 people in one district and 100,000 people in the larger district, the people with the smaller district, their vote is 10 times more powerful than one in which the population is much more dispersed and diluted. So you can't have districts that are not equal in population. Incumbent protection is a value that is usually rejected. Most voters don't want to protect incumbents, but you could say, I want to protect my incumbent because I feel like this person might have seniority within the chamber. They might understand the district, know how to get the district resources. There's a number of arguments that could be made for that. But generally, this is towards the bottom for most mappers, but could not be for you. Minority representation is one that's important to a lot of voters. The idea that communities of color, typically the ones that have historically been marginalized through this process, should be held to have a meaningful voice in this process in which their representation is factored in just as much as white voters. And so this is something that is reflected in what's called the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And so this is a federal statute that needs to be adhered to with your maps. Party advantage is another one. And then the inverse of this is partisan fairness. So say you want your party to win as many votes as possible at the expense of the other party. Again, not something that most Pennsylvania voters want. Some people are fully transparent about that and will say so. But on the flip side, there are a lot of Pennsylvania voters who believe that both parties should have a chance to win a majority of seats. And so they want to see a map drawn in which there is a fair shot for voters of both parties to have their voice heard. Then, of course, there's the wild card. We don't pretend to know every value that is going to come up for Pennsylvanians. So the wild card could be anything else that you think might matter to you as you're drawing these districts. There are a couple lessons to learn as you're going through these. The first is that you can't have them all. There's no such thing as a perfect map. So you're going to have to make choices on what values matter most to you. And that's the second lesson, is that you have to make trade-offs. So for example, if you want to create a map that overall values competitive elections, then you might have to compromise a little bit on your compactness score. Because if Democrats, for example, are clustered in cities in Pennsylvania, Republicans tend to spread out in rural parts of the state, then you might have to put some of them together in a district that is a little more sprawling to create those competitive elections. So you can't have everything, and you have to be comfortable with some trade-offs. There's no such thing as a perfect map. So what we encourage everybody to do with Flashes of Insight is take a few minutes and think about what values matter most to you. What goals do you want to see in your map? And this ends up being the strategy for how you are going to draw your map. So teachers, if you want, go ahead and pause this video for a minute or two and have your students think about the goals that matter most to them as they are drawing their map. If you're not ready to pause, we'll keep moving forward. We're going to look at Dave's Redistricting app. They've got a user guide up on their website that explains it. I'm going to do a tutorial here of how to draw a map. So we're going to go into, yes, I've done the steps and I'm ready. So I'm going to click through directly to Dave's Redistricting. So I'm already logged in, so I should actually log off, and you can see then. Log me out, please. There we go. All right. And so this is how you sign up. You click on the sign up button. It's free. They don't ask for any data besides your email and ask you to set up a password. That way you can save your map. Your map automatically saves, and you can come back to it at a later point. So just go ahead and fill that info out, create your account, and then I'm going to log in here. And it'll take you, once you log in, it'll take you either to the DRA homepage, or it'll take you to your maps, which are in this this tab with some lines next to it. So I'm going to go just click on Pennsylvania really quickly to give you a lay of the current maps that we've got. We've got our 2022 congressional map that was just put in place. This is actually a mistake. It should be 17 districts. We've got 17 districts now. Then we've got our state Senate map, and then we've got our new state House map. So you can take a look at these maps here, click on Explore the Map, and it'll show you all the different details that go into a congressional map. I'm going to not linger on this too long because I want to show how to create your own map. But we'll pop this screen out so you can see that we've got Pennsylvania's 17 districts, right? They're broken down. I'm going to put on my county lines, this little button down here. You can add a bunch of different overlays. I'm going to click on county lines so we can see what the county, kind of get our bearings in Pennsylvania here. But each of these districts then has its own data field. So you've got, if I hover over District 16, over on the right side of the screen, you can then see demographic information, and you can see election information as you hover. You can also just select District 1 here, right here, and you can see all that info for District 16. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, well, let's step back and we can take a look at this. I'm in view only mode, so it's helpful to actually be in your own map to really get a feel for this. So let's go to maps. And here's all the maps that I've drawn or received from House Republicans, House Democrats, what their proposals were as we analyze those. We're going to click on this new map button up here. And then you're going to name it. So I'm just going to say webinar. We're going to pick our state, Pennsylvania. We're going to map to Congress. We're going to say all the districts have equal population. And then we're going to say there's 17 seats. here is our target population. Every seat needs to have 764,865 people, if at all possible. So we're good there. We're going to be using the 2020 census data, and we are going to click apply, and that is going to start our mapping process here. So like I said, all of Pennsylvania will populate, and you're going to see the ability to adjust your overlays or your guidelines here. The precinct lines that I'm looking at right now in red, those are kind of visually overwhelming. So I'm going to take those off, and I'm going to put our county lines on. I like to put a background map on, and I'm going to put county labels on as well. All right, so now we've got our 17 districts that we have to assign different counties, cities, precincts, or census blocks to. We're not literally drawing lines. We're instead going to be selecting these counties and then assigning them to districts. So you can see District 1 has not been filled in yet, but this is where we would see the district information that we've created so far. As I scroll over each county or precinct, right now I've got precincts selected. So I've got some random precincts that I'm just scrolling over here, Susquehanna and Wayne County. And so what you're looking at is on this right toolbar over here at each different precinct, and it's going to show you total population. It's going to show you voting age demographics, and it's also going to show you, if you scroll down, it's going to show you election results from 7 or 8 statewide elections between 2016 and 2020. Right, so it's helpful to just start drawing districts. I'm going to select District 1. District 1 is usually in southeastern PA, but just for ease of demonstration, I'm going to pick District 1 here, and I'm going to use this paint map feature. Click on that. I'm going to paint by county too. I don't want to paint by precinct because that's going to take me a while. I'm going to paint by county. You can see Erie County over on the right toolbar. I'm going to see 270,000 people in it. I'm just going to click on Erie County, and it automatically assigned them to District 1. Same with Crawford County. Added those 84,000. Now we've got 354,000 people in District 1. We are 410,000 people short, so we want to keep drawing. Mercer, let's put Venango County in there. Let's put Warren, Forest. All right, we're getting closer, 203,000. Let's do Clarion, and maybe we're 166. Butler County is 193,000. You can see from the bar on the right. So that's a little too big. Let's see about Armstrong or Lawrence. Now we're getting close, 15,000. So you'll note I'm only focused right now on getting my target population. But what I just did is I created a district that might not be very compact because it puts Lawrence and Armstrong in, but it ignores Butler County. So we might have to think about the sacrifices we just made to do that. Maybe we want to take Armstrong out. So I'm going to use this undo button here, take Armstrong out, and then maybe go McKean County and Elk County. And now we're getting close. Now we're about 8,000 people short, which is a pretty good number just when you're starting your map, just to kind of get a lay of the land, put some districts down on the screen, and then you can go back in later, really zoom in, and then that's when you start mapping on the precinct and the block level. Right. So let's go into District 2 here. I'm going to put District 2. Let's make that Butler and Beaver and Armstrong County. All right, we're at 337,000. Might make sense to put Allegheny County in there too, but as I hover over Allegheny County, you can see over on the right side that there are 120,000 or 1.2 million people in Allegheny County. That's way more than the 337 that we need. So we're going to have to zoom into Allegheny County here. So I'm going to go with my pan so I can zoom over and then go back to paint. And then I'm going to click on precinct. And now I'm going to be mapping just on precinct level. And so I'm going to click and hold my cursor here, and now I'm just mapping by precinct. I'm assigning these to District 2, and my numbers are going down 308,000. They're kind of slow. So what you could do is you can increase the paintbrush size here. That way your cursor is grabbing more people. But what you're doing right now is you're kind of indiscriminately mapping. We could instead go to city, and we want to put city on. And now we can see, you lose your county boundaries, but you can kind of see, let's put Franklin Park in. And now here you're honoring that goal of trying to limit county municipal splits by mapping purely by municipality, which is, it's an important feature in Pennsylvania. So I'm going to just kind of click on these. It takes a little bit of time. Click on each of these municipalities. And what I know just from local knowledge is that this is the river here. One of the rivers that leads into Pittsburgh. So I'm going to map kind of along that river. I'm not going to put anything on the south side of the Allegheny. I'm going to only go on the north side. Okay. All right, and you can kind of see we're getting closer, 199,000 now. All right. Go. So we're 83,000. Let's put in this, and you're just essentially working your way towards the 100,000 or towards the zero target population, right? And eventually what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get down as close to zero as possible. And that's where you go into these census blocks. The census blocks can really be fun to work with, but also a challenge to work with, because you're breaking up individual precincts. So I'm going to click on block, and then it's helpful to turn on your precinct lines at this point so you can see what precinct you're breaking up. So I've got clicked on block. Now I'm going to click into that precinct, and it's going to give me the opportunity to map by block, right? So say I'm just going to put these in District 3 just for now. And you can see the block info over here is going to be much smaller. We were dealing precincts, range from 700 to 5,000 people. Here we're getting, some of them are going to be, oh, I got to turn my paintbrush down. My brush is too big. There we go. So if we're looking at individual blocks, we're talking dozens of people. And so this is what's going to help you get down to zero population deviation, right? So let's back up. We're not ready for that yet. And we're just going to kind of, put some districts on the map for now. Okay. So I've done some mapping here. Oh, I could still put some more in Pittsburgh. Let's do a few more of these. Oops, I'm still in block. I don't want to do that. I'm going to go back to precinct. There we go. You're just working your way. We're just north of Pittsburgh here. Work your way towards zero population. We're going to stay on the north side of the river. All right. Anyway, say we get we get close enough to zero, and we decide, all right, we want to lock these districts so we don't accidentally change them. So I'm going to lock District 1 over here. I'm going to lock District 2. Now I want to do the rest of Allegheny County. I've put a fair, 300, 400,000 people in Allegheny County. Now I'm going to put the rest in District 3. So I'm going to click on a District 3, go to my county button, and then click all of county. And you're going to see, we still have too many people in, 167,000. But it didn't change because we locked District 2. It didn't change any of those precincts that we had put into District 2 when I selected the entire county. Right. So now you're just going to keep working on this. Eventually, you're going to balance out your districts. But the most important thing is to keep an eye on what values mattered most to you. What were your primary goals? Were you trying to create compact districts? Were you trying to create competitive districts? So as you're drawing your map, keep an eye on the overall district details right here. So District 3, for example, pretty heavily Democratic. It's got, most of Pittsburgh. It's got all of Pittsburgh and then parts of Allegheny County. So that's, it's a fairly blue territory. If we click on 2, we can see this is a more Republican map, our district, about 8 points. District 1 going to be more Republican still, about 16 points. And so if you want to create competitive districts out of that, you might maybe add some more Democratic voters from Pittsburgh into District 2 to try to balance out those partisan, those numbers, if that's a goal for you. If that's not a goal for you and you're focused only on maintaining county splits or limiting county splits, then you might try to find counties that go well with District 1, still needs 8,000 people, District 2 needs 18,000 people. What counties and municipalities can you put with this district so that you don't have to really dig into that precinct or that block level to avoid those splits. I'm going to back up and then go to a completed map. Let's go look at the most recent congressional map. This is a copy of it that is editable. So as this thing loads up, wait a sec. All right, so you can see all of Pennsylvania is mapped. The population deviation is either +1 or -1 all the way through. So it's 2 people. So this was considered constitutional. You can see each district has its details here. So these maps went all the way down to the block level, and then split a certain number of counties, municipalities, and precincts to get down to this population deviation. I'm going to click on the statistics button here, and you can see the statistics for partisan information and demographics within Pennsylvania's congressional map. You can see heavily blue shaded districts favor Democrats, heavily red shaded districts favor Republicans. This is based off of a composite of previous election results from 2016 to 2020. It's weighted a little towards Democrats because Democrats had a very good year in 2018 that Republicans weren't quite able to match in other years. So these things are a little more skewed to the left than one might think, but it still gives you a pretty good gauge of how a district would vote. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 solidly Democratic seats, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 solidly Republican seats, and then the remaining 5 seats would be considered toss-ups or competitive, right? If we're looking at demographics, if minority representation was a goal for you, then you'll want to look at this seat here. These maps created 2 districts which are called majority minority districts. Those are seats in which the majority of residents, voting age population, so people 18 or older who are eligible to vote, are either a single racial minority or a coalition of racial minorities. So District 3, for example, is about 51% Black. And then District 2 combines 22% Hispanic, 26% Black, about 11% Asian into that coalition district. There are other districts. District 5 is what would be called an influence district or an opportunity district, where communities of color or voters of color would have an opportunity to influence an election, even though they're not in the solid majority. They still make up a sizable enough voting block that they can't really be ignored. And so that's a value for a number of mappers. So, and then I'm going to go into the Analyze button here. There's a lot of different reading you can do about this on the Davis website. Click on that info button here that explains this spider graph looking thing. Essentially, they index your scores on each of these ratings here, and the closer to 100 you are, the bigger the area of your green spider plot, and the better your map is relative to other maps. We're going to look particularly at just a few things. First is compactness. Compactness scores, the closer to 1 you are, it's a scale of 0 to 1%. The closer to 1 or 100% you are, the more compact your district is. So these are decent scores. They're not great. 31% is about average. The citizens map that we drew was, I think, 38% on compactness. That was a goal that was really important for our mappers, so we put that in. And then we see information on the number of counties, municipalities that are split in the map here. There are 14 counties that are split 17 times. That's actually very good. Our map split 14 counties 16 times, I believe. They also split 23 municipalities here. And our map, I believe, split 23 as well. So their map is good on the county municipal splits. It's a solid map. So, but that's how you use these analytical tools. Dave's redistricting is very powerful in that regard. So, and then you can do some really advanced stuff over here, which we don't have time for today. But ultimately, I'm going to go back to our slides. That's the tutorial for the mapping platform. If you have any questions at any point, we are still available. We're leaving this website up. The Committee of 70 is for you to use. But if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to bettergov@70.org, and we will be happy to get back to you with an answer, or hopefully some help if you need it. So this is an important topic that deserves to be focused on decade round, not just in redistricting years. And we are excited that you've come to this webinar, and hope that you enjoy drawing your own map. Thank you.